when playing king and pawn endings, often you'll see a situation where one pawn is trying to outrace your king to try and get to the end of the board before your king gets there to stop it. Now, obviously you can count and try and work out if he goes here, I go there, he goes here, I go there, and you could try and work it out like this, but sometimes it gets a bit complicated and you could lose count along the way. So there is an easier way, of which I would like to show you, just so that you can just quickly glance at the board and you can see immediately whether you're going to reach it on time, or if you're the pawn, whether you're going to promote before they can get there and stop you. So the technique that's used is called the square of the pawn. Now, if you take a look at this pawn on b4, it has 1, 2, 3, 4 moves before it gets to make a queen. So the way we look at it is that we look at 4 moves towards the end of the board. You then take 4 squares sideways. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, and this makes a square if you include the pawn. And the rule is, if the black king, the defending king, can enter the square of the pawn on the next go, then it will definitely be able to cash the pawn. So if it's black to play, black can just enter the square of the pawn, and then you can see that it will reach in time to catch the pawn. So that would be a draw. However, if it was a white to play, white would simply be able to push his pawn forward, thereby reducing the square of the pawn to this square. And the black king would just miss out and not be able to reach it. And so the pawn would queen just in time before the black king would reach it. So it's a very easy way of being able to notice it. And even easier, I feel, is that rather than counting up the board and across the board, you can actually do it diagonally. So what I always do is take the pawn and go diagonally all the way to the edge of the board. And then you can see the square a lot easier this way. Well, this becomes a triangle, but if you visualize a square like this, then the square becomes a lot easier to visualize when you do the diagonal one straight away. And you could see then whether the king can immediately enter, which it can. So therefore, in this one, you can easily see whether the king's going to catch it. I'd like to show you another example of this. So if I get to the next one. Now, in this one, the question is black to play? Is black able to reach the pawn before we get to the end of the board? And this one's a tricky one. Whether or not you draw the pawn and draw the square either by counting or doing the diagonal one, which I think is a lot easier. You can see the square is quite a large one. And so black to play, black can easily enter the square of the pawn by any of these routes here. And so we'll be able to stop the pawn getting to the end of the board like that. However, there's something you've forgotten about, and that this pawn is still on its original square. So even though it's black's go next go, and you can enter the square of the pawn, this pawn actually can go 2 squares, and now has a drastically reduced the size of the square to this. And black has embarrassingly just outside the square of the pawn. So it's very important to realize when the pawn is on its original square, that you have to calculate it from when it moves 2 squares close to it. So the king needs to be a lot closer than usual on that one. So in this next example, I'd like to be able to combine what we've just done, and the ideas of the king and pawn versus king, and remembering that the rules about the opposition, and always keeping your king in front of the pawn to try and work out what's going on here. It's white to play, and white can win this game, except it's slightly difficult, more difficult than you first think. So the first things first, people always try to just push the pawn. Now if you push the pawn, you see the square of the pawn, he's like this. And the black king can enter it straight away. So happen by either of these two squares. So, unfortunately, pushing the pawn does not work. So therefore, you have to try and work out whether you can make it to the pawn in time with your king in order to get the opposition. Now wait, have a little think about that. Perhaps pause the DVD here to have a think, because it's not obvious, and it's very important to realize in these endgames you do need to take your time to be calculating. King and pawn endings are the type of endings where you have to be super accurate. One little move can change the result of the game. So you really need to be calculating perfectly. I want you to take a time and have a pause. So, if we go back to the rules that I mentioned in the first clip about the king and pawn versus king, and there were 3 rules I told you about. They were to keep your pawn behind the king, so the king always has to be in front of the pawn, and the pawn not even be level with it. You need to make sure you get the opposition, stop your opponent getting the opposition. And when you do get the opposition, I want you to be able to make progress. So the critical squares to get to with your king are the ones to the front of the pawn here. And it's kind of a race to who can control those squares first. Now, first thing that people do is to push the king up after king. To get to this point, and they realize that they can't get the opposition. In fact, black has got the opposition now, so they're in a bit of trouble here. So that doesn't quite work. And it's only when you start to realize this that it takes 3 moves for the black king to get here, here, and here. And also it takes 3 moves for the white king to get to control these squares. So it takes the same amount of time. However, the critical squares are all 3 of these squares, and the quickest way for a king to travel is diagonally. So, should you go this way, you reach one of those critical squares a lot quicker than black can get there. And this way now, it is definitely a win, because white has reached the front of the pawn, black cannot get the opposition, and white can indeed progress. So something like this, king here, white gets the opposition. After the king is at the way, the white king makes progress, and you can see starting to protect the pawn all the way to the end of the board. And after king here, you can play something like this. You get to the dream position. And you can see that was nice and simple to do, but you have to be aware of those that situation here right at the beginning, and to notice that these are very critical point squares in front of the king, in front of the pawn, and you have to reach there first. So if you took your time, worked that out, and realised that you need to go via f4 to get in front of the pawn, then you would have made it and got the full point. Had you rushed and just gone towards d4, d5, then you wouldn't have made it there in time, and black would have got the draw. The rook's pawn is always the worst pawn that you could have when you're trying to win an ending. Unfortunately, due to the fact it's on the edge of the board, it means that there's a lot less room for the manoeuvring around either file. So there are lots of freaky endgames which end in draws due to the fact that the king it's a rook's pawn. It doesn't just happen in king and pawn endings, but also in rook and pawn endings, queen and pawn endings, and with various other pieces. There are lots of situations which they will end up in a draw. So it's useful to know that a rook's pawn versus a king is always a draw as long as the king can get into the corner. And it's actually got a very easy way of defending. There's no need to know about the opposition or anything like that. Black can just simply stay in the corner all day long. White cannot get in out of the corners. No matter how hard he tries, the black king can just go up and down, in and out the corner as much as he likes. And should white come to h6 and try and get him out of the corner, he'll just go sideways and out the corner. And even when the pawn reaches check. Now, it's going to be stalemate. Or the pawn will drop. So there's nothing that white can do about that. So it's a very, very easy way to draw. Now, another example. And I just mentioned that it's very easy to draw should the defending king make it to the corner. However, now, unfortunately, this king hasn't made it to the corner. So it looks as though white has just managed to wriggle a win out of this. However, if it was white to play, it would be quite nice for him because he can play king's g6 and get the horizontal opposition, stopping the black king, making it to the corner, and then just advancing his pawn to the end of the board. However, it's black to play, and if black were to play king to f7, the game would also be drawn. For the fact that now he has the opposition and he will not let the white king out of the way of the pawn, and so the pawn cannot pass. So if the pawn was to push, ideally the black king would have to stay there, just not move, but he does need to move. And he should move to f8, for the idea that if the white king saw its opportunity to move out of the way, then the king would go back toward his corner and not be budged again. However, he can also just about get to f6, because after king g8, it looks like, again, he's tried to create a path for the pawn, and looks like he's managed to create a clear path. But king g6 saves the day, because now it stops the pawn advancing, and the black king will just go to h5 and take the pawn. So in this position, after, for example, king f6, white would then try to push the pawn to h5, and again, a lot of things for here. King f7 is the easy way of doing this, because then after h6, you go to f8, and after king h8, you go back to f7, and this king is completely trapped and cannot move. So therefore, after h7, you play king f8, and it's actually you're the one that's stalemating white here, much to his frustration. So there are two different ways to defend with the rook's pawn. So the easiest way is to put your king in the corner and it can never be budged. But do not give up should your king not be able to make it to the corner. If you can get back in time, you can trap the attacking king in the corner and obtain a stalemate, and this is also sufficient to draw the game. Now, I'd like to show you some endgame tactics here. Tactics don't just happen in the middle game, but also occur in the endgame. And the first one is not so much of a tactical device, but it's just something that's very important to know. When we have passed pawns, and what we mean by this are pawns that have no defending pawns stopping them going by, so no pawns in front of them or on the files and adjacent to them. These are extremely strong. Passed pawns are what you aim to get in the endgame, because they're the easiest ones to get to the end of the board to promote. When we have what we call connected pass pawns, these are two pawns which protect each other, and the files next to each other, then this is extremely strong. This is exactly what we dream of. And connected pass pawns, they actually defend themselves. So it's black to play, and black is going to play king f4 here, with the idea that he's attacking the backwards pawn, the pawn that's at the back of the paint and the base of the pawn chain. And so if he takes on f3, he hopes to take on e4 as well. However, that pawn is actually immune, and white can simply just advance his king to b2. Because now, if black were to play king takes f3, then the e4 pawn would advance to e5, and has now run away, and the black king cannot catch it. So no matter how hard it tries, the pawn will make it to the end of the board, and get a queen before the king could catch it. So in this position, after king b2, black cannot actually capture that pawn, so he needs to just come back. But therefore, in that space of time, you can just simply bring your king up just to help support the advancement of the pawns, and then it's a very easy endgame to win. So in this position, despite the fact that the black king could come and attack the pawns, and the white king is so far away, it does not matter, because the connected pass pawns, they defend themselves. It's a very, very key concept to remember, because once you have these two connected pass pawns, it's very, very easy to win, and actually the king cannot take them. The other one is more of a tactical device, which I really, really like, and it's a very important thing to remember in king and pawn endings, because the idea does come up, and as I said, it's all down to passed pawns. It's just trying to create a passed pawn. If you can create a passed pawn, then you should be able to win this game. Now, it's black to play here. Had it been white to play, the result would have been different. But it's black to play, and it looks like black is just losing. White has this huge passed pawn down here. Black's king stuck in the corner, and white's king's right next to this passed pawn to help support it. However, they are in this drawage position over here. And, you know, the black king is holding the position over this side of the board. So, black doesn't want to move his king at all. He wants to try and create some sort of attack, otherwise he just sits down. He would get advanced on, so he doesn't want that to happen. So if it was white's play, white would probably just play b3 and stop all of black's advances. However, with black to play, black can play b3 himself. Now this seems like it's a bit futile, because after a pawn takes, then another pawn takes, and a pawn takes, and another pawn takes, and then this endgame should be just one for white, in the fact that he's still got the extra pawn, and he could come back and try and get this one, and then try and get a queen himself. However, after b3, black has other ideas. As I said before, it's all about trying to create a passed pawn. Now, whichever pawn white was to take with, well, if he doesn't take it, then, for example, this black pawn will take one of these two and then becomes a queen on the next go. So white must capture with one of the pawns. For example, let's play a take b3. Now the idea, as I said, is to create a passed pawn. Now at the moment, this pawn here is nearly passed, but it still can't come to this square because this b pawn is stopping it. So all you need to do is get this b pawn out the way. So here comes a surprising c3. And I'm going to give that an exclamation mark, because it's a fantastic move. And now, again, you're threatening to get a queen in 2 moves. So if white takes, then voila, you've created a passed pawn, and you're going to get that passed pawn into a queen in just 2 moves time. And there's nothing that white can do. He can't get his own queen in that space of time, because this black queen now can dominate the game and pick up the pawns quite easily. So it's a very useful tactic to know. b3. It also works whether the pawn decides to take with c pawn. You do exactly the same thing. Now this is the pawn that you want to try and create and make passed. So you play a3, and after a take, b takes a3, then c3, followed by c2, c1, queen. And white doesn't have a defense against it. If he doesn't take, as I said, he can just promote in a couple of moves. As I said, if it was white to play in this position, then white could have stopped all of that by playing b3 himself. And now that's what has stopped all of black's plans, and he can't create himself a passed pawn now. And this game should be winning for white. So this idea is called the breakthrough. Whenever you have a situation like this and 3 pawns meet 3 pawns, if you push the middle one, you can often create a passed pawn like this. And this works because black's pawns are much further advanced than white's here, so he's able to get to the end of the board much quicker than white's. Should you have shifted this formation a couple of rows backwards or for blacks or forwards for white, then the result might have been different. But it's a good idea to remember this breakthrough method, as it does happen quite a lot in king and pawn endings.
Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe.